This is what total defeat looks like. Ukraine has erased all Putin's tanks. War is often measured by territory gained or lost. Lines on maps shift. Flags rise and fall. Victories are announced. Defeats are denied. But sometimes the clearest evidence of failure is not movement. It is paralysis. A battle that never resolves. An objective that never arrives. A place where forces are poured in endlessly, only to disappear without result. That place is Vovchansk. Since May 2024, this battered city near Ukraine's northeastern border has become a silent indictment of Russia's war effort. Not because Ukraine launched a spectacular counteroffensive there, not because Russian forces were dramatically encircled, but because Moscow tried again and again to take it and failed every single time. The city lies in ruins, entire neighborhoods have been erased, infrastructure is shredded beyond recognition. Yet despite flattening Vovchansk almost completely, Russia still does not control it. And more tellingly, Russia no longer even tries to capture it the way a modern army should. The tanks are gone. The armored columns have vanished. What remains are small groups of soldiers advancing on foot into a landscape controlled by Ukrainian drones. This is what total defeat looks like in the 21st century. The promise of a breakthrough. When Russian forces renewed pressure in the Kharkiv region in May 2024, the messaging was clear. This was supposed to be momentum, a renewed push, proof that Moscow could still dictate the tempo of the war. Vovchansk was chosen for a reason. Its proximity to the Russian border made logistics theoretically easier. Supply routes were shorter, reinforcements could be rotated quickly. The terrain offered access points that planners believed could be exploited before Ukraine had time to respond. On paper, it made sense. But war does not unfold on paper. From the first days of the renewed assault, Ukrainian surveillance assets began detecting movement far earlier than Russian commanders expected. Reconnaissance drones spotted assembly areas. Electronic intelligence intercepted communications. Patterns formed quickly. Russia was preparing a conventional assault in an unconventional war. Armor meets a hostile sky. For decades, Russian military doctrine relied on armor as the backbone of offensive action. Tanks were meant to punch through defenses. Infantry fighting vehicles followed. Artillery cleared the way. Speed and mass created shock. That doctrine assumed something crucial: survivability. In Vovchansk, survivability disappeared. Ukrainian drones did not need air superiority in the traditional sense. They needed persistence, constant eyes in the sky, a web of sensors feeding real-time data to strike teams. Small quadcopters hovered silently above tree lines. Fixed-wing platforms loitered beyond visual range. FPV drones waited near likely routes of advance, operators ready to strike within seconds. The first armored losses were dismissed as bad luck. The next wave was not. Tanks were hit from angles crews could not respond to. Optics shattered. Tracks were destroyed. Turrets jammed. Vehicles burned without ever firing a shot. Within weeks, Russian mechanized assaults began to stall before reaching Ukrainian defensive lines. A battlefield that punishes concentration. Modern warfare punishes mass when detection is easy. Around Vovchansk, every attempt to gather forces became a vulnerability. Convoys were spotted before they moved. Vehicles leaving cover were tracked continuously. Even decoys failed, as Ukrainian operators learned to distinguish real targets from bait. Artillery strikes followed drone sightings with devastating speed. FPV drones hunted individual vehicles like predators. Recovery crews were hit attempting to retrieve damaged equipment. Losses were not just material, they were psychological. Crews began refusing to advance without guarantees that could not be given. Commanders faced an impossible choice: halt operations and admit failure, or push forward knowing the outcome. They chose the latter. The disappearance of mechanized assaults. By early summer, observers noticed something striking. Russian attacks continued, but without tanks. The armored spearheads that once defined Russian operations were absent. Infantry fighting vehicles appeared sporadically, often destroyed within minutes. Heavy armor became a rarity. This was not a pause. It was a collapse in capability. Ukraine had not merely destroyed vehicles, it had denied their use. Any attempt to deploy armor around Vovchansk resulted in near immediate loss. The cost-benefit calculation no longer made sense, so Russian forces adapted in the only way left. They walked. Infantry without protection. Advancing on foot in modern combat zones is a last resort. Without armored cover, infantry becomes exposed to everything: artillery, drones, snipers, mortars. Russian soldiers began moving in small groups, attempting to blend into terrain already reduced to rubble. They used shell holes, collapsed buildings, and tree lines for concealment. Heavy weapons were scarce. Ammunition was limited. Ukraine adjusted effortlessly. Drones tracked individuals. Thermal sensors detected movement at night. Mortar fire landed with precision guided by aerial observation. Casualty evacuation became nearly impossible under constant surveillance. Entire squads were eliminated without ever engaging Ukrainian troops directly. This was not fighting an enemy. It was surviving an environment. A city turned against its attackers. Vovchansk's destruction did not benefit the attackers. It helped the defenders. Collapsed buildings created cover for Ukrainian observers. Rubble restricted vehicle movement. Streets became funnels easily monitored from above. Open areas offered no concealment. Urban combat usually favors defenders. In Vovchansk, it overwhelmingly favored the side with drones. Every ruined structure became a hiding place for sensors. Every destroyed intersection became a kill zone. Every attempt to advance triggered detection. Russia flattened the city and made it unwinnable. The propaganda gap. Despite battlefield realities, Moscow's messaging remained defiant. Official statements spoke of pressure. Advances were claimed without evidence. Maps were redrawn to suggest movement that did not exist. Losses were minimized or ignored. This gap between rhetoric and reality widened with each passing week. Russian soldiers knew the truth. Ukrainian defenders saw the results daily. Independent analysts tracked losses that contradicted official narratives. But propaganda serves a purpose beyond truth. It delays accountability. Why the assaults continue. From a military perspective, the continued push toward Vovchansk makes little sense. The objective cannot be achieved at acceptable cost. The terrain favors defenders. Ukrainian capabilities are proven, yet the assaults persist. Why? Because stopping would mean admitting that the strategy failed. The Kremlin's approach to this war relies on endurance, not decisive victories, but sustained pressure. The belief is that Ukraine will eventually exhaust its manpower, resources, or political support. Vovchansk is part of that gamble. Even failed attacks are framed as pressure. Even losses are presented as progress. As long as fighting continues, the narrative of momentum can be maintained. But endurance strategies only work when losses are manageable. Here, they are not. The cost of irreplaceable losses tanks are not just steel. They are systems. Each destroyed vehicle represents years of production, trained crews, logistics chains, maintenance infrastructure. Replacing them under sanctions is slow and expensive. Ukraine understands this. Destroying armor around Vovchansk does more than stop an assault. It degrades Russia's future options across the entire front. Every tank lost there cannot appear elsewhere, and the losses continue. Morale under constant surveillance. One of the least visible effects of drone warfare is psychological. Russian soldiers around Vovchansk operate under the assumption that they are always being watched. Movement invites attention. Rest offers no safety. Darkness provides limited protection against thermal sensors. This erodes morale faster than traditional combat. Intercepted communications reveal frustration, fear, and resignation. Complaints about leadership increase. Confidence in missions declines. An army that expects defeat behaves differently. Ukraine exploits that difference. No breakthrough, no withdrawal. Normally, prolonged failure leads to adjustment. Objectives shift, forces redeploy, commanders reassess. None of that has happened here. Russia has neither achieved a breakthrough nor chosen to withdraw. It remains stuck in an operational limbo, committed enough to keep attacking, unwilling to admit defeat. This limbo is costly. Resources are consumed without result. Units are rotated into the same losing conditions. Experience teaches nothing new because circumstances do not change. This is not strategy, it is inertia. What would victory even look like? At this stage, even capturing Vovchansk would offer limited value. The city is destroyed, infrastructure is gone. Holding it would require continuous defense against counterattacks. The cost of taking it would far outweigh its utility. That reality raises an uncomfortable question. Why is Russia still trying? Because the goal is no longer the city. The goal is to avoid the symbolism of failure. The moment a strategy breaks, endurance strategies collapse when losses exceed tolerance. That threshold is not purely numerical. It is political, psychological, and economic. Around Vovchansk, the signs are accumulating. Equipment depletion, troop fatigue, narrative strain, tactical stagnation. Eventually, something gives. Either the assaults stop quietly, rebranded as operational adjustments, or losses spike to a level that forces recognition of failure. History suggests the latter often comes first. Total defeat without surrender. Total defeat does not always arrive with dramatic images. Sometimes it arrives slowly, invisibly, through repetition without progress. It looks like soldiers advancing on foot because vehicles no longer exist. It looks like cities destroyed without being taken. It looks like momentum claimed without evidence. Vovchansk embodies that reality. Russia erased the city. Ukraine erased the armor. And what remains is a battlefield frozen in failure. Proof that modern war punishes rigidity, rewards adaptation, and exposes illusions with relentless clarity. This is not just a local defeat, it is a warning. And it shows exactly what total defeat looks like.